Rhymes Without Reason by the Poor Bloody Infantry. Gunners are a race apart, hard of head and hard of heart. Like the gods, they sit and view all that other people do. Like the sisters three of fate, they do not discriminate. Our support line or the Huns? What's the difference to the guns? Retaliation do you seek? Ring them up and wait a week. They will certainly reply in the distant by and by, and should a shell explode amiss, each will swear it was not his, for he's never ever shot anywhere about that spot. And, what's more, his guns could not. Sappers are wonderfully clever by birth, and though they're not meek, they inherit the earth. Should your trenches prove leaky, they'll work with a will to make all the water flow up the next hill. And when I say work, I should really explain that we find the labor while they find the brain. They build nice, deep dugouts as quick as can be, but quicker still mark them reserved for RE. And strangely, the speed of theirs seems to decline as the scene of their labors draws near the front line. Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another book review on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and normally we look at books that are specifically about firearms, but today we're doing something a little bit different, and we're taking a look today at a reprint of The Wipers Times. This was a trench newspaper that was published from 1916 until just after the end of the war in the Ypres area of the British front lines in World War I. The name, The Wipers Times, comes from the typical British mispronunciation of the town name, Ypres, Y-P-R-E-S, which the Brits just simplified to Wipers. This was originally produced, it was put forth by a Captain F.J. Roberts, and kind of remarkably, it was actually tolerated by the British general staff, the officers in the area. And it is a satirical joke newspaper. This is like the original inspiration for Blackadder Goes Forth, if you've seen that. It's a 100-year-old version of The Onion, specifically pertaining to trench combat in World War I, which you wouldn't normally think of as being, the most hilariously funny sort of situation. But what we have here is a place where you had a bunch of guys, lonely, unhappy, and in constant danger of life and limb, and some of them got together and decided to put pen to paper and create something that would just kind of brighten everyone's spirits, acknowledge some of the realities of the situation they were in, and also some of the insanities of war and military organization. So there are actually a lot of inside jokes in this that are difficult to recognize and to understand today, but there's certainly also plenty of content that you and I can find just as funny today, I think, as the soldiers did in 1916, 17, and 18. So the contents here, as you can see when we flip through it, there's poetry, short stories, sort of, a little bit of parody drama, advice columns, reports from Intelligence HQ, those are often somewhat entertaining, advertisements. They are, of course, all phony, fake advertisements, but advertisements for products, for restaurants, for theater productions, really all the sort of things that you would see in a proper British newspaper of this period. There were 23 issues in total. The first 4 were actually produced, called The Wipers Times, and then the name was changed several times successively as Roberts and his men were reposted to different areas. They'd rename it with whatever location they were actually printing from. And they were printing this basically on the front lines. They scrounged a pedal-operated printing press from some Belgian village somewhere, I presume, and actually managed to put out a limited circulation newspaper, but one that was recognizable enough and high quality enough that it has survived with us to this day. Now, there were a lot of publications like this, put out in 1s and 2s, especially by small units, but those haven't generally survived, or they haven't survived outside the collections of people who are very specifically interested in that material. The Wipers Times did. So there have been at least a couple of different reprints of it. This, I believe, is the 2015 reprint that I have a copy of. There was also one in 2013, and there may have been one since then. Be aware, if you go looking for this, I'll post a link to Amazon in the description below. but because there are multiple editions, I can't post a link to everything, and this is not currently in print. So the ones that are available are all leftover stock from previous printing runs. There is also a paperback book about like a nonfiction book about the history of the Wipers Times. I haven't actually read that. It may be good, it may not, I don't know. But it looks rather similar. So if you're looking for this on Amazon, make sure that what you're getting is actually a reprint of the original Wipers Times issues and not the book about them. There is also a television program that the BBC put together just a couple of years ago called The Wipers Times, which is basically a dramatized recreation of the actual production of the newspaper and what was involved in doing that, and as well as some staged dramatic reinterpretations of things like some of the advertisements that are in the paper. That's actually, it's a fun BBC program. It's an hour and a half long. I'll also have a link to that in the description text below, because it in its full length is available on YouTube, which is kind of cool. So like I said, this is out of print, so it's available right now. When I'm filming this, it's available very cheap. I think this copy cost me about like equal parts shipping and the book, so only a few dollars. If a bunch of people decide that this is something that they want and to start buying them up, the prices on Amazon will quickly rise as the available used copies get purchased up. So if you're watching this, first off, I apologize if you're watching it late and there aren't any readily available copies. Definitely check out the video on BBC. That'll give you some of the idea of it. But as a primary source document for what was actually going on, what guys were actually thinking, what was the mindset, what was humor for these guys, I think this is a really cool resource. It's fun to read on the same level that it was read in 1917, and it's also interesting to read from a historical perspective. One thing that's important, one thing that makes this a little different than a lot of memoirs is that this is all content that was written at the spur of the moment. There's no hindsight, there's no recollection to what was written here, because this was all published right at the time, and that includes the 2 episodes, or the 2 issues, which were actually renamed Better Times, that were printed after the armistice, after the end of the war, but before guys had actually demobilized and gone home. So even there, you know, the actual what was going through people's minds at the end of the war, after the war had ended. How did the soldiers react to that? What did they think about it? So that's something you can get out of this that you can't easily find a whole lot of other places, especially not today, where we basically have, I think we have, in fact, no living veterans of World War I anymore. So hopefully you enjoyed the book review, something a little bit different today. We will be back next week for one that is a little more specifically about firearms. Thanks for watching.